The door shut behind her with a sound she couldn't name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. Just final. Elisabeth turned instinctively, expecting the light to follow. It didn't. She reached for the switch. Click. Nothing. Click. Nothing. Papa, she called, voice thin. The darkness didn't answer. Then came the click again. But not the switch. The lock. From the outside. She froze. Papa. She was 17, and she trusted him. He had told her to help him with the door. Said it was part of his new workshop, that he needed her small hands to help guide a frame into place. He had smiled. He had joked. He had even said, "You're the only one I can rely on, Liesl." She had wanted to be helpful, wanted to be seen. Now, she was in a concrete box beneath the house, and the air had changed. It smelled like dust, like mildew, like nothingness. There were no windows, no sound, just the hum of a small fluorescent tube above her, flickering like it couldn't make up its mind. She turned again, felt along the wall. Concrete, cold, seamless. Her fingers brushed against something metal, a sink, a pipe, then a bed, then a bucket. Papa, she said again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then footsteps. Above her. Faint. Muffled. Walking away. She didn't scream. Not at first. Because she couldn't believe it. Not her father. Not Joseph Fritzl. He was strict. Controlling. Always watching. But he was her father. A man who wore his belt tight and spoke like every word was a threat. But also the man who kissed her forehead when she cried after her mother yelled too loudly. No. This had to be a mistake. She waited. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time started slipping. Eventually, the light turned off. By itself. In the total blackness, she curled against the wall, knees to chest. She didn't know what day it was. Didn't know if it was day at all. There was no clock. No window. No sun. Only the occasional metallic creak of pipes. And once, the distant thud of footsteps overhead. Her mother. Her siblings. So close. But they didn't know. They couldn't know. Could they? The next time the door opened, it wasn't with kindness. Joseph stepped in, holding a tray. Bread. Water. A single apple. He didn't speak. He placed it on the floor, turned, and walked out. The door closed. The lock turned. That was it. She wanted to run at him. To scream. To ask why. But her body was too light. Too stiff. She hadn't eaten in days. She crawled to the tray and ate with trembling fingers. Then, slowly, her mind began to catch up. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't an accident. This was permanent. That night, or what she guessed was night, he came back. This time he spoke. "I've thought a lot about this," he said, voice measured, almost casual. "The world, it doesn't deserve you. It's too loud, too filthy. I'm keeping you safe." She stared at him, mouth open. "You'll adjust," he said. "We'll have a new life down here. A better one." She backed into the wall, hands trembling. "Let me go." He didn't blink. No. The door closed again. And this time, she screamed. Until her voice cracked. Until her throat bled. Until there was no one left to hear it. The weeks bled together. She learned to mark time by the sound of the door. It always came the same way. Footsteps above, slow and deliberate, followed by the mechanical hiss of the hidden panel sliding open. He always brought food. Always said something before he left. Sometimes kind. Sometimes cruel. Sometimes nothing at all. But then one night, he brought something different. A mattress. Blankets. Clothes. "I want you to be comfortable," he said. She didn't answer. Then he touched her. Not like a father. Not like anyone should. Just for a second. A brush of the hair. A palm on the cheek that lingered too long. Something inside her curled up and died. She lay in bed that night, eyes wide in the dark, and finally let herself think it. No one is coming. Above her, the floor creaked. Voices. Plates clinking. A television. Life. While she lived under it. While she became nothing. He told her he was protecting her from drugs. From the bad boys. From a broken world. But every time he said it, he locked the door behind him. Every time he smiled, he made her smaller. Elisabeth learned to disappear in plain sight. She stopped asking questions, stopped yelling, stopped hoping. The underground room became a second skin. Concrete was her sky. A flickering light bulb became her sun. And her father? He became a god. Unseen, omnipresent, wrathful. The first time he assaulted her, he called it love. The second time, he said she owed him. By the third time, she stopped keeping count. Time no longer passed in days. It passed in bruises, in meals, in the smell of damp clothes, in silence. She kept her mind alive with scraps of imagination, remembered books she'd read, phrases she used to scribble in her diary, lines from songs she hadn't heard in years. But nothing could block out the reality. She was alone, and he was not done. Then one morning, she felt it. A slow nausea, a dizziness that wouldn't leave. Her body wasn't just hers anymore. She told him. He didn't flinch, just said, it was bound to happen. Like they were roommates. Like this was normal. 9 months later, in the same basement, under the same flickering bulb, she gave birth on the floor, alone. The walls didn't echo her screams. They swallowed them. And when the baby cried, it sounded like a voice from another world. It was a girl. She named her Kirsten. And for a brief, shattered second, Elisabeth felt something soft inside her stir. A light. A reason. Even if the sky was concrete. Joseph looked at the child like she was an object. He brought formula, toys, a blanket with cartoon bears on it, then left again. Same as always. Time bled forward. More babies came. 3 in total stayed in the cellar. The others? He took them. Upstairs. He told the outside world that Elisabeth had run away, joined a cult, left her babies behind like letters in a mailbox. He dropped them off on his doorstep with fake notes from Elisabeth, claiming she couldn't care for them. His wife, Elisabeth's mother, believed him. She even adopted the children, while their real mother was beneath her feet. The days were endless, but never the same. Sometimes Joseph came down kind, brought sweets, spoke like a husband returning home from work. Other days, he came down with rage. Elisabeth never knew which door she was opening, or which man would walk through it. She tried once, tried to stab him with a fork. He laughed, said she was too weak, too soft, that the outside world wouldn't want her even if she escaped. You're ruined, he whispered. This is your home now. She stopped fighting, but her mind didn't die. She began teaching the children, reading to them, making up games. She told them the walls were temporary, even when she didn't believe it. One day, Kirsten collapsed. Eyes rolled back, body stiff. Joseph panicked. The girl was too sick, too loud, too visible. He brought her to a hospital, used a fake name, said he found her. Doctors didn't buy it. The girl was too pale, too malnourished, too hidden. They called the police. When they questioned him, his story didn't add up. They needed the mother. That's when Joseph returned to the cellar and told Elisabeth she could come upstairs. Her legs buckled when she tried to stand. The light above blinded her. She hadn't seen the sun in 24 years. The hospital was chaos. Reporters, doctors, detectives. She spoke in a voice no one recognized. But when she said her name, Elisabeth Fritzl, the world stopped. The truth came out. The cellar, the rape, the children, the years, the locked door, the family upstairs. The nurses thought it was a seizure. Kirsten's body convulsed on the stretcher, eyes rolled back, arms twisted unnaturally. She looked like a ghost of a child, pale, brittle, like she hadn't seen sunlight in a lifetime. Because she hadn't. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics whispered. She was underweight. Her teeth were rotting. Her skin had never touched real light. One of them reached for the radio. This doesn't feel right. Elisabeth stood back in the shadows, watching them drive off with her daughter. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from a question she hadn't dared ask in years. What now? Joseph told her to go back downstairs, but something in her snapped. That night, she couldn't sleep. The ceiling in the cellar pulsed like it was alive, like it knew the secret it was keeping. Her children stirred beside her, Stefan breathing softly, Felix curled up like a comma. They didn't know the world was different now, that the walls had cracked. They've taken her to a real hospital. She'll see doctors, nurses, people with questions, people who don't believe in fairy tales about angels dropping off sick children in the night. Joseph paced upstairs. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't shaved. He was unraveling too. The next morning, he came into the cellar with food. But Elisabeth didn't touch it. He stared at her. She'll be fine. We'll get her back. Elisabeth raised her head slowly. Her voice was like ice. She needs to stay there. She'll die if she comes back. Joseph blinked. Are you forgetting everything I've done for you? For them. I remember all of it, she said. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But for the first time in decades, her words were not afraid. He dropped the tray and walked out. And for the first time, he locked the door late. At the hospital, the doctors were baffled. Kirsten's organs were failing, but her medical records were non-existent. Her social security number didn't exist. Her speech patterns were stunted. She screamed at windows like they burned. And she muttered one word when she woke up. Mama. That was all it took. Authorities sent out a press release. A plea. If the mother is out there, please come forward. Joseph saw the broadcast and panicked. But Elisabeth, she saw a lifeline. He brought her upstairs for the first time in 24 years. Disguised. Cloaked. Under his breath, he told her, say nothing. I'll do the talking. She nodded. But in the sterile waiting room, surrounded by nurses with gentle hands and faces that didn't know horror, Elisabeth looked at her daughter, tubes in her neck, IVs in her arm, and knew. This was the moment. A doctor stepped forward. Are you the girl's mother? Elisabeth hesitated. Then she whispered, yes. Everything stopped. The nurses exchanged glances. The police were called. Joseph tried to step in, but the officer blocked him. Elisabeth clutched her daughter's hand. She knew what came next would break the sky open. In a private room, she told them everything. Not all at once. Not like an explosion. It came out like a slow, leaking wound. The cellar. I've been down there since I was 18. She spoke of the door, the code, the silence. Of the births. The screams swallowed by walls. Of the 3 children she had to give away. And the 3 she had to raise underground. One of the officers had to leave the room. Another covered her mouth and whispered, Dear God. They asked if she knew the man who did this. She said, he's my father. The news spread like wildfire. Journalists camped outside. Police descended on the quiet street. Reporters knocked on neighbors' doors asking, Did you hear anything? The house had looked so normal. In the basement, behind a hidden hallway, police found the metal door. Beyond it, hell. 3 children stared up at them. One asked, Are you here to take us to the angels? One officer cried. The police arrived at 40 Ibstrasse with gloves on and guns drawn. The house sat quietly under a pale Austrian sky, its windows blind, its doors still. From the outside, it was all suburban normalcy. A 2-story home with flower pots and a trimmed hedge. Nothing about it screamed what it held inside. But once inside, the screaming began. Not in voices, not in cries, but in the walls. They stripped the floorboards, knocked on panels, followed Elisabeth's words like a map etched in pain. Behind a shelf in the basement, they found it. A concrete wall, sealed with reinforced metal. Behind it, a steel door. No knob. Only a keypad. The code was still there. They punched it in. Click. The smell hit first. Stale air, old rot, the suffocation of decades. And then came the sight. A narrow corridor leading to a series of makeshift rooms. Crude plumbing. Mold. A calendar with no years. Toys rusted with time. And children's drawings of houses, stars, but no sun. Joseph Fritzl sat quietly in the interrogation room. His hands were folded, his eyes downcast. He looked like any old man, graying, tired, unimposing. But the file in front of the detective said otherwise. Tell me about the cellar. Joseph looked up. It was for their safety. The detective leaned forward. Whose? My daughter's. The world outside is dangerous. She wanted to stay. The room went cold. You kidnapped her. You raped her. You kept her underground for 24 years. Joseph blinked. No. She could have left. Anytime. Silence. Then the detective opened a folder. Inside, photos. The keypad door. The medical reports. The birth records. Kirsten's failing organs. You say she could have left. Then why did she never come upstairs? Joseph stared at the wall. Because she's mine. The confession came slowly. Not in sorrow. Not in shame. But in pride. He detailed how he designed the cellar in the 1980s. How he chose Elisabeth because she was disobedient. How he trained her. How he built a soundproof world where only his voice mattered. He boasted of how the door couldn't be opened from the inside. Of how he fathered 7 children. 1 died. He burned the body. And he told it all like he was describing furniture. Meanwhile, upstairs, Elisabeth sat in a safe room. Her children clung to her. The ones from below had never seen a sky. The ones from above didn't know they had siblings. They stared at each other like ghosts passing through dimensions. One of the older girls asked her, "Why did Grandpa keep you there?" Elisabeth couldn't answer. She simply pulled them close. She was seeing a therapist now, the first person in years who listened without keys in his hand. News broke worldwide. Monster father builds dungeon for daughter. 24 years of hell below a home. Austrian horror cellar discovered. Outside the house, candlelight vigils burned. Neighbors cried into microphones. We had no idea, they sobbed. He was always polite. He waved when mowing the lawn. One man admitted, "Sometimes I heard noises from the basement. I just thought, plumbing." The trial began in 2009. Joseph Fritzl walked in wearing a blue binder over his face. Inside the courtroom, Elisabeth sat in a private viewing area. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, but her presence alone shook him. For the first time, he lowered his head. The charges read out like a checklist of horror. Rape, incest, false imprisonment, coercion, murder by neglect. He pleaded guilty to all but murder, until he saw Elisabeth, seated, silent, sovereign in her suffering. Then, and only then, did he say, "Yes, I did it all." The judge sentenced him to life in prison. Elisabeth didn't attend the sentencing. She was done giving him her presence. Joseph Fritzl never returned to the house on Ibstrasse. After the sentencing, he was transferred to Garson Abbey Prison, a fortified facility tucked deep into Upper Austria. There, he was placed in a specialized unit for the criminally insane. They gave him books, a schedule, 3 meals a day. But what he wanted most was control, and no one obeyed him anymore. In the beginning, he tried to talk to other inmates, to guards, to psychiatrists. But the more he spoke, the more they saw, not brilliance or intellect or vision, but decay. A man who'd built an empire of pain, brick by brick, convinced he was the architect of order. He wrote letters to Elisabeth. They were never delivered. He once asked for a photo of the children. He was told to stop dreaming. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline psychopathy, and an extreme sexual sadism that defied classification. When asked why he did it, he gave different answers each time. One day she disrespected me. She reminded me of her mother. I wanted a family no one else could touch. Sometimes he'd whisper, "She was always mine." But no matter the reason, the truth was simpler. He wanted to be a god. And in the darkness of that cellar, he made himself one. Meanwhile, Elisabeth was learning sunlight again. She and her children were relocated to a secure village under government protection. Their new home had wide windows and no locked doors. For months, none of them would sleep unless every light was left on. The children from below, now teenagers, didn't know how to walk outside without flinching. Birds scared them. Elevators made them panic. The smell of cement triggered nightmares. But slowly, they adapted. Elisabeth changed her name, got therapy, and stayed away from the press. But in one quiet moment during an interview with her trauma counselor, off the record, she said something that never left him. "I survived because I had to. But now, I want to live because I choose to." She wasn't interested in revenge, only in reclaiming what time hadn't completely taken. In 2019, Joseph Fritzl changed his name to Mehrhoff. He told the court it was because of safety concerns that inmates were starting to recognize him, threaten him, that his name was a target. But the guards who watched him knew the real reason. His name was no longer feared. It was loathed. He wanted to escape it, to vanish into another name the way he once buried a girl behind steel doors. But names don't erase legacies, and his legacy was already written in horror. Years later, one of the older children drew a picture. It showed a staircase. At the top, sunlight. At the bottom, a girl. Her hands were not bound. Her eyes were not closed. She was walking upward, slowly, toward the light. When asked who the girl was, the child said, "That's my mom." And maybe that's the real ending here. Not a trial, not a prison sentence, not headlines or documentaries or even public outrage, but a child, born in darkness, able to imagine the concept of light. Because somewhere along the way, despite it all, Elisabeth taught them something Joseph never could, that the human spirit isn't just breakable, it's rebuildable. If this story made you think, share it, because silence is where monsters live, and truth is how you evict them. Subscribe for more real-life stories that haunt, heal, and never leave you the same.